The sacred Moonstone Pavilion thrummed with ancient power as hundreds of wolves gathered for the bonding ceremony. Lirelei pressed herself against the marble pillar, trying to remain invisible among the servants. She shouldn't be here. Healers weren't permitted at mating ceremonies, especially not healers carrying the forbidden mark beneath their gloves. Keep your head down and serve the wine, Keeper Aldara had instructed earlier that evening, her weathered face stern with warning. Nothing more. These ceremonies are sacred to the wolves. One wrong move and they'll have you executed for sacrilege. But Lirelei couldn't tear her gaze from the center platform where Prince Raven waited. The kingdom's most powerful alpha heir stood rigid as stone, while Lady Celestria approached with the ceremonial chalice. Everything about this felt wrong, the way Raven's hands trembled slightly, how the council elders exchanged knowing glances filled with dark satisfaction, and most of all, the unnatural shimmer in the ceremonial wine that made her healer's instincts scream. Celestria moved with predatory grace, her midnight blue gown flowing like water, her smile sharp as a blade. She'd arrived at court 3 years ago with impeccable credentials from the Eastern Territories, quickly rising to become the council's chosen bride for the prince. Too quickly, Lirelei had always thought. Too perfectly. No one rose through the complex web of wolf politics that fast without secrets. The crowd fell silent as Celestria raised the chalice toward Raven's lips. Tradition demanded the prince drink first, sealing their bond forever before the gathered packs. Once he drank, there would be no going back. The mating bond would lock into place, binding them for eternity. Lirelei's hidden mark burned beneath her glove like a brand, growing hotter with each step Celestria took. The sensation was familiar yet foreign. She'd felt it only once before, the day her mother died, as if something deep in her blood was awakening to danger. She watched the dark liquid swirl in the chalice, and suddenly she could see it not with her eyes but with something deeper. Poison. Wolfsbane concentrated enough to stop even an alpha's heart, mixed with silver powder to prevent healing, and something else, something that would make it look natural. Around her, the other servants continued their duties, oblivious to the danger. The noble wolves in their finery watched with approval as their prince prepared to drink his doom. Only Lirelei saw the truth, and she was nobody, a half-blood healer who shouldn't even exist, much less interfere with royal ceremonies. No, she breathed, her voice barely a whisper. Her feet moved without her permission, carrying her forward through the crowd. No, stop! But it was too late. The chalice touched Raven's lips. He began to drink. Agony exploded through Lirelei's chest, not her own pain, but his. The forbidden mark on her palm blazed to life, glowing through her glove with silver-white fire as she felt poison flooding his system through a connection that shouldn't exist. Ancient words her mouth formed without her knowledge tore from her throat, carrying across the pavilion with supernatural force that made every wolf present bare their teeth in instinctive recognition. The words were old, older than the territories, older than the separation of the packs. They spoke of betrayal and poison, of bonds broken and souls crying out for justice. Every wolf understood them in their bones, even if their minds couldn't translate. Every eye turned as she collapsed, her body convulsing as if the poison flowed through her own veins. Through blurring vision, she saw Prince Raven drop the chalice, his face contorting in pain. But the last thing she truly saw wasn't the prince, it was him. The Alpha King himself, legendary, lethal, and supposedly cursed to never find his true mate launching from the royal platform with inhuman speed, his eyes locked not on his son but on her. King Zephyr Night Whisper, who hadn't attended a mating ceremony in 50 years, who'd been standing in the shadows like a reluctant specter, moved faster than lightning toward her falling form. His cloak billowed behind him like wings of midnight, and his eyes, those storm-gray eyes that had seen centuries pass, blazed with golden fire. Then darkness claimed her, and she knew nothing more. Warmth. That was the first sensation that penetrated the darkness. Luxurious, enveloping warmth that smelled of pine forests and winter winds. Lirelei floated in that warmth, reluctant to surface from its comfort, her mind struggling to piece together fragmented memories. The ceremony, the poison, the prince, the pain. She's waking. The voice was deep, commanding, and definitely unhappy. Lirelei's eyes snapped open to find herself staring at an ornate ceiling painted with scenes of ancient wolf packs hunting beneath a crimson moon. The artwork was exquisite, each wolf rendered in such detail she could see individual fur strands. This wasn't the servants' quarters. This wasn't even the lower palace where healers were sometimes permitted. These were the royal chambers. She recognized the distinctive black stone walls that only existed in the king's tower. Don't move too quickly. A woman with silver hair and kind eyes, Healer Thessa. Lirelei recognized her from the few times nobility had visited the lower healing halls, pressed a cool hand to Lirelei's forehead. You've been unconscious for 3 days. Your body went through significant trauma. Whatever connection you have to the prince saved his life, but it nearly killed you. 3 days? Lirelei tried to sit up, her mind racing. The ceremony, the poison, Prince Raven, was he alive? But as she moved, she realized what she was wrapped in, and her blood turned to ice. The fabric was midnight black, shot through with silver thread that formed the pattern of running wolves. Those wolves seemed to move in the candlelight, chasing each other in an eternal hunt around the edges of the garment. This wasn't just any cloak, the power radiating from it, the way it seemed to recognize her skin, the sheer impossibility of her wearing it. Is this? Her voice cracked. She swallowed and tried again. Is this the Alpha King's cloak? Indeed it is. The deep voice from before drew her attention to the shadows by the window. A man stepped forward, and Lirelei's breath caught in her throat. She'd seen Prince Raven at court celebrations, watched from afar as visiting nobles paid their respects. But she'd never seen him. Never King Zephyr Night Whisper, the Alpha who'd united the 7 wolf territories through blood and brilliance, who'd ruled for 3 centuries with an iron fist wrapped in silk. He was devastating, taller than any wolf she'd ever encountered, with shoulders broad enough to fill the doorway. He moved with the controlled grace of an apex predator. Power rolled off him in waves that made every instinct in her body scream to bare her throat in submission, even though she wasn't a wolf. His hair was black as a moonless night, streaked with premature silver that spoke of the burden of his curse. But it was his eyes that trapped her, storm gray like winter tempests, ancient and weary, yet burning with an intensity that seemed to see straight through to her soul. Leave us, he commanded, not raising his voice, not needing to. Healer Thessa bowed low and fled without a word, the door closing behind her with a soft click that sounded like a prison cell locking. The silence that followed was suffocating. Lirelei could hear her own heartbeat, could feel the weight of his gaze like a physical touch. The cloak around her seemed to pulse with warmth, responding to his proximity. Your Majesty. Lirelei started to unwrap herself from his cloak, her fingers fumbling with the impossible softness of it, but his growl stopped her. Cold. It was a sound that bypassed her human ears and went straight to something primal in her bones. Don't. The single word carried enough alpha command to freeze her in place, though it shouldn't have worked on a mostly human healer. That cloak is the only thing keeping you stable right now. Remove it, and the magical backlash from what you did could kill you. What I did? Confusion mixed with fear in her voice. I don't understand. I saw the poison and I couldn't let him. You revealed yourself. He moved closer, each step deliberate, predatory. She could smell him now, pine forests and winter winds, just like his cloak. But underneath it, something wild and dangerous that made her pulse race. A hidden healer carrying the seer's mark, screaming my name in the old tongue at a sacred ceremony witnessed by every pack leader in the 7 territories. I don't speak old tongue, Lirelei protested. I don't even know what I said. And I never said your name. I was trying to warn the prince. You spoke the mate's lament. His voice dropped lower, rougher, filled with something she couldn't identify. Words that haven't been uttered in 3 centuries that can only be spoken by one who shares a soul bond. Words of claiming and recognition that every wolf present understood in their bones. And yes, you did speak my name. My true name. The one known only to my bloodline. He moved closer still, until he was standing beside her bed. The air between them crackled with tension, with something electric and dangerous. Then, shocking her completely, he knelt, bringing them to eye level. This close, she could see flecks of blue in those storm-gray eyes, could count the faint scars that marked his face from centuries of battle, could smell that intoxicating scent of evergreen and frost that made her want to lean closer despite every warning bell in her mind. But here's the interesting part, he continued, his voice barely above a whisper now. You weren't looking at my son when you spoke those words. When you collapsed, when you screamed those ancient words of bonding, Your eyes were locked on me. Only me. That's impossible, Lirelei breathed, her heart hammering against her ribs. I don't even know you. I've never... When you fell, he interrupted, leaning closer, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body. Your mark didn't just glow. It burned with the exact pattern of my bloodline's curse. The curse that swore no Night Whisper Alpha King would ever find their true mate. The curse that has haunted my family for 500 years, growing stronger with each generation. His hand moved toward hers, stopping just short of touching. Your mark. Show me. With trembling fingers, Lirelei pulled off her glove. The mark on her palm was no longer glowing, but its pattern was clear in the candlelight, a wolf howling at a crescent moon, surrounded by ancient runes she'd never been able to read. No matter how many old texts she'd studied in secret. But now, looking at it with him so close, she could see something else. The wolf in her mark had eyes, storm-gray eyes that matched his exactly. Zephyr inhaled sharply, his entire body going rigid. When he spoke, his voice was rough with something that might have been wonder or dread. That's not just the seer's mark. That's the mirror mark, the sign of one who carries half a soul, waiting for its match. But it's impossible. The prophecy said the mirror mark bearer would be pure wolf royalty, not a human healer. The bloodlines don't, they can't. My mother was wolf-blooded, Lirelei admitted quietly, her voice barely audible. She died when I was born. I never knew which pack she came from. Father would never speak of it. He said it was too dangerous for me to know. What was her name? The question came out sharp, urgent, almost desperate. Seraphina Moonweaver. The Alpha King went completely still, like a wolf that had just scented mortal danger. Every muscle in his body tensed, and for a moment, Lirelei thought he might shift right there. Then he was on his feet, backing away from her as if she'd transformed into something poisonous. Get dressed, he commanded, his voice arctic, all warmth gone. The council demands answers about your disruption of the ceremony, and when they learn whose daughter you really are... He stopped, his jaw clenching so hard she could hear his teeth grind. Whose daughter? Lirelei's voice rose despite herself. What aren't you telling me? What was my mother to you? He paused at the door, his massive frame tense with barely controlled emotion. When he looked back, his eyes had shifted to wolf gold, a sign of extreme distress in an alpha. Seraphina Moonweaver was my sister, my twin sister. The one who ran away 25 years ago to marry a human healer against all pack law. The one whose death I've been avenging ever since. The door slammed behind him with enough force to rattle the ancient windows, leaving Lirelei alone with the impossible truth. She was the Alpha King's niece. She'd disrupted his son's mating ceremony with power she didn't understand. And somehow, impossibly, her soul was calling to his. The council chamber reeked of hostility and barely contained violence. Lirelei stood in the center of a stone circle that had witnessed 1,000 judgments over the centuries, still wrapped in Zephyr's cloak because her own clothes had mysteriously vanished. 7 elder wolves sat in judgment, their eyes glowing various shades of amber in the torchlight, each one radiating enough power to crush a normal human with presence alone. The chamber itself was ancient, carved from a single piece of obsidian that reflected the torchlight in eerie patterns. Symbols of the 7 territories were etched into the floor, the Night Whisper Wolves, the Northern Frostfang, the Eastern Moonshadow, and others she didn't recognize. She stood at the intersection of all 7, marked as outsider to all. You dare appear before us wearing his cloak? Elder Grimwald snarled, his scarred face twisted with disgust. He was the oldest of them, a veteran of the territory wars, and his hatred for humans was legendary. A half-breed mongrel who disrupted the most sacred ceremony in a generation? You should be executed for sacrilege. She saved my life. Prince Raven's voice cut through the chamber as he entered, still pale but walking steadily. The poison would have killed me in minutes if she hadn't. Silence, pup, Grimwald snapped. You don't speak unless spoken to. This is council business now. She's not just human. Zephyr's voice cut through like a blade of ice as he entered behind his son. The temperature in the room dropped noticeably with his presence. Lady Lirelei is of the Moonweaver bloodline. The gasps that echoed through the chamber were like physical blows. Several of the elders rose to their feet, and Lirelei saw claws extending involuntarily from their fingers. The Moonweaver name clearly carried weight she didn't understand. Lady Celestria rose from among the witnesses, her perfect features contorted with rage. She'd arrived at court 3 years ago with impeccable credentials from the Eastern Territories, but something about her reaction seemed too personal, too invested. Impossible. The Moonweaver line died with Princess Seraphina's betrayal. Everyone knows she perished without heir. The healers confirmed it. She died in childbirth, and the baby died with her. Clearly not, Raven said, his voice carrying an edge sharp enough to cut. He moved closer to Lorali, and she noticed he positioned himself slightly between her and the most hostile elders. The question we should be asking is why someone tried to poison me at my own mating ceremony. Lady Celestria, you prepared the chalice. Perhaps you could explain. How dare you? Celestria's voice went shrill. I've served this court, faithfully, for 3 years. The ceremony was interrupted before it could be completed. We don't even know if there was really poison or if this creature simply wanted to draw attention to herself. The chalice contained enough concentrated wolfsbane to kill 3 alphas. Lirelei interrupted, finding her voice despite the weight of so many predatory gazes. Mixed with silver powder to prevent healing and monkshood extract to make it appear like natural heart failure. I could smell it, taste it in the air. My healer's training. How could you possibly know the exact composition? Elder Grimvold demanded, leaning forward with suspicious interest. Unless you were the one who... Pain lanced through Lirelei's palm like a hot knife, cutting off his accusation. The mirror mark flared to life, blazing with silver-white fire that made every wolf in the room step back instinctively. Images flooded her mind with the force of a breaking dam. Celestria meeting with a hooded figure in the castle's abandoned tower, gold changing hands, a vial of poison being carefully poured into the ceremonial chalice, whispered words about the prince's death triggering a succession crisis. But there was more. She saw Celestria's true face beneath the beautiful mask, something ancient and wrong, something that wasn't wolf at all. Because she's a true seer, Zephyr said quietly, but his voice carried to every corner of the chamber. The firstborn to our kind in 3 centuries. The gift manifests in the Moonweaver bloodline every 10th generation. She's an abomination, Celestria snarled, but there was something desperate in her tone now, something fearful. Half-human, unmarked by any pack, carrying forbidden magic. Enough. Zephyr's command silenced everyone, the temperature in the room dropping so fast that ice actually formed on the windows. Lady Lirelei saved my son's life. That alone grants her protection under ancient law. Protection? Elder Morwen, the only female on the council, stood slowly. There was something different about her movement, an otherworldly grace that seemed out of place even among supernatural wolves. Her eyes held depths that spoke of secrets far older than her apparent age. Your Majesty, with all respect, her presence here changes everything. A Moonweaver heir with the mirror mark, appearing just as the Northern Packs mass at our borders. This cannot be coincidence. What do the Northern Packs have to do with anything? Lirelei asked, though her mark was beginning to burn again with that strange prophetic heat. Silence, child, Morwen said, though her tone was almost gentle. You don't yet understand what you've walked into. The Northern Packs have been moving for weeks, claiming an ancient vision guides them. The messenger arrived this morning. Alpha Korvac of the Frostfang Pack claims you as his mate through vision right. What? Lirelei and Zephyr spoke simultaneously, and the harmony of their voices sent visible shivers through several council members. It's an ancient law that predates even the territories, Grimvold explained with barely concealed satisfaction. The mirror mark bearer can be claimed through 3 ways: vision, combat, or bonding. Korvac says he saw you in a prophetic dream, down to the exact pattern of your mark. He demands you be delivered to him within the moon's turning, or he'll consider it an act of war. Lirelei's knees nearly buckled. She'd heard stories of Korvac even in the servant quarters, the butcher of the north, who'd slaughtered entire packs that defied him, who ruled through fear and brutality. The thought of being claimed by such a monster made her stomach revolt. She's under my protection, Zephyr growled, and the sound was nothing human. The temperature dropped further, and frost began forming on the stone floor around his feet. Korvac can make whatever claims he wishes. He'll not have her. Which brings us to an interesting point, Celestria said, having recovered her composure. Her voice turned sickly sweet as honey poisoned with nightshade. Why exactly is she wearing your cloak, Your Majesty? The Alpha King's cloak that, according to tradition, can only be worn by blood family or... Your true mate. The silence that followed was so complete that Lirelei could hear her own heartbeat thundering in her ears. Every eye in the chamber fixed on them, waiting. She could feel the weight of their stares like physical touches. Some curious, some hostile, all dangerous. She is family, Zephyr said carefully, but Lirelei could hear the strain in his voice. My niece, as I've explained. Then why did the cloak accept her completely? Grimwald challenged, standing now with aggressive intent. The enchantment woven into that cloak is ancient, Your Majesty. It would recognize blood, family differently than other connections. The cloak would warm a family member, yes, but it wouldn't bond to them. Yet look, it clings to her as if she were... The test of flames will settle this, Elder Morwen interrupted, her voice carrying an authority that seemed to transcend her position on the council. Something in her tone made Lirelei's mark pulse with recognition, as if responding to a kindred power. When words fail and suspicions rise, let the ancient fire reveal truth. The ceremonial chamber beneath the castle was older than memory itself, carved from black volcanic stone that still held traces of the primordial fires that had shaped it. Lirelei stood at one end of the vast space, dressed now in a simple white shift that offered little protection against the cold or what was coming. Her skin prickled with more than chill. The very air here was thick with old magic, the kind that predated civilization. The chamber was circular, with 7 pillars representing each territory. Ancient runes covered every surface, glowing faintly with their own inner light. This was a place of judgment, of truth, of irreversible consequences. You can still refuse this madness, Raven whispered urgently beside her. He'd insisted on being her witness, despite his father's obvious displeasure. Take exile instead. I'll help you disappear. I have contacts in the human kingdoms who would shelter you, give you a new identity. And let that monster Korvac claim me by default? Lirelei shook her head, though her whole body trembled. Or worse, start a war over me. Your father saved me from the council's immediate judgment. I won't repay that by running. My father, Raven started, then stopped, his expression troubled. The prince studied her with eyes too, knowing for his years. He hasn't been the same since you arrived. I've never seen him so affected. The curse has weighed on him for centuries, but these past 3 days it's been different. He's afraid, Lirelei, and my father fears nothing. What exactly is this curse? Lirelei asked. Everyone speaks of it, but... The drums began before Raven could answer a deep, primal rhythm that seemed to come from the stones themselves. The sound reverberated through her bones, awakening something primitive in her blood. The council filed in through the ancient doorway, followed by select witnesses. Celestria was among them, her perfect features alight with anticipation that made Lirelei's stomach turn. The lady clearly expected her to burn. Last came King Zephyr, and Lirelei's breath caught despite herself. He wore the traditional alpha regalia for sacred trials, bare-chested despite the cold, his torso covered in ritualistic tattoos that told the history of his bloodline. Each mark was a story of battles won, enemies defeated, alliances forged. The tattoos seemed to move in the firelight, wolves running across his skin in an eternal hunt. But it was his eyes that held her storm gray darkening to something deeper, something that spoke of barely controlled emotion. The test of flames is sacred, Elder Morwen intoned, stepping forward into the circle of light cast by ancient braziers. Again, there was that otherworldly quality to her movements, as if she existed slightly outside normal reality. Born from the first mating of wolf and moon, it reveals truth when words become weapons and suspicions poison trust. If a true mate bond exists between the accused, the flames will recognize their souls and draw them together, leaving them unharmed. If not... She didn't need to finish. Everyone knew what happened to those who failed the test. The flames would consume them from the inside out, burning away the lie along with the liar. It was said to be the most painful death possible, soul and body destroyed together. Who stands as challenger to the claimed bond? Morwen asked, though her ancient eyes seemed to already know the answer. I do. Celestria stepped forward, surprising everyone. Her smile was sharp as broken glass. As Prince Raven's intended mate, I have the right to challenge any claim that affects the royal line. That's not how the law works, Raven began angrily. Actually, it is, Elder Grimwald interrupted with a cold smile that showed too many teeth. Lady Celestria is correct in her interpretation of ancient law. If Lady Lirelei is proven to be the Alpha King's true mate, it would nullify Prince Raven's claim to the throne, as any offspring from the king's true mate bond would take precedence over previous heirs. Lirelei saw Zephyr's jaw clench so hard she heard his teeth grind. This was about more than just them, it was about the kingdom's future, the stability of the realm, everything he'd built over centuries of careful rule. "Then let us begin," Zephyr said, his voice betraying nothing of the turmoil she could see in his eyes. The Flamekeeper stepped forward, an ancient wolf so old his hair had gone completely white, his eyes milky with age but still sharp with power. He carried a brazier of silver fire, not normal flames, but magical ones that responded to the soul's truth. The flames danced and writhed like living things, reaching toward Lirelei and Zephyr as if tasting their essence. He set the brazier between them. They stood 20 feet apart, but it might as well have been miles. The flames rose immediately, forming a wall of silver light that danced and shifted like liquid mercury. "If you are true mates," the keeper explained in a voice like rustling parchment, "the flames will call to your souls. You must walk through them to reach each other. Only the truth of your bond will protect you. If the bond is false, or forced, or mistaken, the flames will know." "Begin," Morwen commanded. The moment the word was spoken, Lirelei's mark exploded with heat. Not painful this time, but overwhelming, like her blood had turned to liquid starlight. The flames between them began to change, shifting from silver to deep purple, then to a gold that matched Zephyr's wolf eyes. She heard gasps from the witnesses, but she couldn't look away from what was happening. The flames were calling to her, singing a song only her soul could hear. She took a step forward, then another. The heat should have been unbearable, she could feel it scorching the air, but instead, the flames parted like water before her, creating a path. Through the fire, she could see Zephyr moving too, his expression no longer controlled but raw, with something that looked like wonder mixed with terror. But as they drew closer, something went catastrophically wrong. Black veins began spreading through the golden flames like poison through water, and suddenly Lirelei wasn't walking anymore. She was being pulled, dragged forward by an invisible force that felt like hooks embedded in her soul. Pain lanced through her mark and spread up her arm like liquid fire, following the same pattern as the mark itself. "It's the curse," Healer Thessa shouted from among the witnesses. "The Night Whisper curse is fighting the bond. It's trying to kill her." Lirelei screamed as the black veins reached her, wrapping around her limbs like burning chains. They were cold and hot at once, freezing and burning, tearing at something fundamental inside her. Through her agony, she heard Zephyr roar, not in pain but in fury that shook the ancient stones. The temperature in the chamber plummeted so fast that ice formed on the walls, spreading outward from where he stood like frozen lightning. "Stop the test," Riven shouted, moving toward the flames despite the danger. "No!" Zephyr's command froze everyone in place, carrying such alpha power that even the elders stepped back. The command hit Lirelei too, but instead of controlling her, it seemed to strengthen her, as if his power recognized her as his equal. He was pushing through the corrupted flames now, and Lirelei could see his skin blistering where the black veins touched him, healing almost instantly only to burn again. The curse was literally trying to tear him apart for reaching toward his mate, but he didn't stop. His eyes had gone full wolf gold, and his form was flickering between man and beast. "I won't let it take her," he snarled, his voice barely human. Through the haze of pain, Lirelei saw him fighting toward her with desperate determination. The curse marks spread across his body with each step, creating patterns like black lightning under his skin. But still he came, relentless, unstoppable. When their hands finally touched, the world exploded. The flames, golden, black, and silver, spiraled around them in a tornado of light and shadow. Lirelei felt herself being pulled against Zephyr's chest as he wrapped himself around her, shielding her with his body even as the curse tried to tear them apart. The pain was indescribable, like being unmade and remade at the molecular level. But in that moment of connection, something extraordinary happened. The pain vanished, replaced by something else entirely. A bond so profound it made her weep. She could feel him, not just his body pressed against hers, but his soul. His memories flooded through her. Centuries of loneliness, the crushing weight of leadership, The moment he'd first seen her in the pavilion and known, despite everything, despite the impossibility of it, that she was his. She saw his sister, her mother, young and laughing, then older and defiant, then running away in the night. She felt his rage when he'd learned of her death, his centuries of guilt for not protecting her. And underneath it all, the curse, a living thing that fed on his bloodline's power, growing stronger with each generation. "I'm sorry," he whispered against her hair, his voice broken. "I'm so sorry. I tried to stay away. I knew what you were the moment you collapsed. But the curse, if I claim you, it will kill you. That's what it does. It lets us find our mates only to watch them die." "I can see it," Lirelei gasped, her seer abilities suddenly crystal clear. The flames around them were showing her everything past, present, and potential futures. The curse, it's not what everyone thinks. It doesn't prevent you from finding your mate, it's designed to kill them if you do. But there's more. The one who cast it. She's here. She's been here all along. The flames suddenly died, leaving them standing intertwined in the center of the chamber. Scorch marks covered the floor in a perfect circle around them, forming new runes that hadn't been there before. They were unharmed mostly. Zephyr's arms bore black marks where he'd shielded her, wounds that weren't healing with his usual alpha speed. "The test is concluded," Morwen said, and for the first time her voice shook with something that might have been awe or fear. "The bond is true, but corrupted. The curse." A horn sounded from the castle walls, urgent, panicked. 3 long notes that meant only one thing: invasion. A guard burst into the chamber, his face white with terror. "Your Majesty, the northern packs have breached. The outer walls. Alpha Korvac himself leads them. He demands the seer be surrendered immediately, or he'll burn the city to ash." Zephyr's arms tightened around Lirelei possessively. "Over my dead body." "That can be arranged," a new voice said from the doorway, cold and amused. Everyone turned to see him, Alpha Korvac himself, somehow having bypassed all the castle's defenses. The test's magical discharge must have weakened the protection spells, Lirelei realized with growing horror. The Northern Alpha was everything the story said, and worse. Massive, scarred from hundreds of battles, with eyes that burned red with barely controlled madness. His mere presence made the temperature drop even further, frost spreading from where he stood. "Hello, little seer," he purred, his gaze fixing on Lirelei with predatory interest. "Time to come home where you belong." Before anyone could react, Korvac lunged forward with inhuman speed. Zephyr shoved Lirelei behind him, partially shifting, his hands becoming claws, his teeth lengthening to fangs. The clash of 2 alpha powers sent shockwaves through the chamber, cracking the ancient stones that had stood for millennia. "Get her out!" Zephyr roared to Raven, blocking a vicious strike from Korvac. But Lirelei couldn't move. The moment the 2 alphas had collided, her mark had erupted in agony. She could feel Zephyr's pain as Korvac's claws found flesh, tearing through his shoulder where the curse marks had weakened him. The bond they'd just confirmed in the flames was raw, unshielded, transmitting every sensation between them. "Fascinating," Korvac said as he circled Zephyr like a wolf stalking wounded prey. The great Alpha King finally found his mate, only to be too weak to protect her. "The curse is eating you alive," Night Whisper. "I can smell it rotting you from the inside." "You know nothing about it," Zephyr snarled. But Lirelei could see the truth. He was struggling. The curse marks were spreading with each moment of combat, sapping his legendary strength. "Oh, but I do," Korvac laughed, a sound like breaking bones. "You see, I made a deal with the Shadow Moon Coven. They told me everything about the curse, about the seer who would appear, about how claiming she would give me power over all 7 territories." "Blood magic?" Elder Morwen's voice carried horror. "You made a pact with those witches?" "The witches showed me the future," Korvac confirmed, striking again with brutal efficiency. "They showed me the mirror mark-bearer would appear at a mating ceremony, that she would have the power to reshape our world. They didn't mention she'd already be mated to you, Night Whisper, but that makes this even sweeter. I'll take her, and you'll die knowing you failed." Something in Lirelei snapped at those words. Power erupted from her mark. Not the gentle healing energy she'd always hidden, but something far more ancient and dangerous. Her voice, when she spoke, carried harmonics that made every wolf in the chamber whine in submission. "Stop!" Both alphas froze mid-strike, turning to stare at her. The mirror mark was blazing silver-white up her entire arm now, and her eyes had gone completely white as well, seeing beyond the present into the threads of possibility. "The witches lied to you, Korvac," she said, her voice layered with otherworldly power. "The vision they showed you was false, twisted to serve their purposes. They seek chaos among the packs to weaken us all." "You're lying," Korvac growled, but uncertainty flickered in his mad eyes. "I'm a seer," Lirelai said simply. "I cannot lie about what I see. The Shadow Moon Coven plans to use you to kill Zephyr. Knowing his death will shatter the alliance. Then, when the packs are fighting each other for dominance, they'll unleash something far worse, the original evil that created the curse." Suddenly, Celestria laughed, a sound like shattering glass that made everyone turn. The beautiful noblewoman's features were shifting, melting and reforming into something else entirely. Her perfect blue eyes bled to violet, and shadows began writhing around her form like living serpents. "Oh, how precious," she purred, her voice now carrying undertones that scraped against the ears. "You almost had them fooled, little seer, but not quite." "Witch!" Grimwald gasped, backing away with instinctive revulsion. Shadow Witch, specifically, Celestria or whatever she truly was, confirmed with a mocking bow. "Though I prefer my coven name, Thimeris the Hollow. I've been playing Lady Celestria for 3 years, waiting for the right moment, building trust, positioning myself, all for this." Understanding crashed over Lirelai like a cold wave. "The poison, you weren't trying to kill Raven. You were trying to trigger my awakening." "Clever girl," Thimeris smiled, revealing teeth that were suddenly too sharp, too many. "A seer's power only fully manifests under extreme emotional duress. Watching the prince die would have shattered your mental barriers completely. But this," she gestured at the chaos around them, "a true mate bond fighting against an ancient curse while 2 alphas battle? Oh, this is even better than I planned." Korvac roared in rage, realizing he'd been used, and turned on Thimeris. But she waved her hand almost lazily, and violet energy wrapped around him, freezing him mid-leap like an insect in amber. "Sit, dog," she commanded, and Korvac's body obeyed against his will. Now then, Thimeris focused on Lirelai, shadows gathering around her like a living cloak. "You have something I need, little seer. The location of the Moonweaver Codex, your mother's journal containing the original spell to break the Night Whisper curse. Give it to me, and I might let your mate live a few more hours." "I don't know what you're talking about," Lirelai said, though even as she spoke, images flashed through her mind, a leather journal hidden beneath floorboards, pages covered in her mother's, elegant script, secrets that could reshape the world. "Don't lie to me," Thimeris hissed. Shadows lashed out, wrapping around Zephyr's throat like a noose. He clawed at them, but the cursed wounds on his arms had weakened him too much. Dark stains spread across his skin where the shadows touched. "The journal, or his life. Choose quickly, the curse is already killing him. My shadows will just speed things along." Lirelai felt Zephyr's breathing falter through their bond. The black veins from the curse were spreading across his chest, reaching for his heart with inevitable purpose. "Take me instead," she said desperately. "I'll come willingly, help you find the journal. Just let him go." "No!" Zephyr's voice was strangled but fierce. "How touching," Thimeris mocked, "but unnecessary. You see, once he's dead and you're broken by grief, you'll tell me everything anyway. The Mirror Mark Bearer's power is strongest when fueled by loss." Something inside Lirelai shattered. Power erupted, from her mark raw, uncontrolled, and magnificent. The silver-white explosion threw Thimeris across the chamber, shattered her shadow bonds, and sent cracks racing up every ancient wall. But even as she stood there blazing with power, Lirelai felt the toll. Using this much power without training was burning through her life force. Through their bond, she felt Zephyr's panic. "Lirelai, stop. You're killing yourself." She looked at him with tears streaming down her face. "You're already dying. At least this way." Pain lanced through her chest. She looked down to see shadows emerging from her own shadow, Thimeris's backup plan. "Fool girl." Thimeris spat blood as she stood. "Did you think raw power could defeat centuries of knowledge?" Then howling, hundreds of voices beyond the walls. "Impossible," Thimeris whispered fearfully. Through their bond, Lirelai felt Zephyr's grim satisfaction. You threatened the Alpha King's true mate. The pack comes. The wolves came like a tide of fur and fury, pouring through every entrance. Not just Zephyr's pack, but wolves from all 7 territories. Word of their king's true mate being threatened had spread faster than wildfire, awakening something primal in every wolf's blood, the ancient imperative to protect the alpha pair. Timaris raised her hands, shadows coiling around her like armor. I'll kill them all. No, a new voice said, ancient and powerful. You won't. Elder Morwen stepped forward, and for the first time her true nature revealed itself. The elderly wolf's form shimmered and changed, moonlight wrapping around her until she stood, transformed not just a wolf, but something far older. A lunar sage, one of the legendary mediators between the realm of wolves and the realm of magic. Lunar sage. Timaris breathed, genuine terror replacing her arrogance. But you're all supposed to be dead. We hunted you to extinction. One remained, Morwen said sadly. Hidden among the wolves for 5 centuries, waiting for her. She gestured to Lirelei. The last Moonweaver heir, the one prophesied to heal the rift between our kinds. With a gesture that seemed effortless, Morwen severed Timaris' connection to the Shadow Realm. The witch screamed as her own dark magic turned inward, consuming her from the inside. Within moments, she was gone, pulled into the very void she'd commanded. But the victory felt hollow. Lirelei lay still on the cold stone, her breathing so shallow it was barely perceptible. The silver patterns on her arm were fading, and through their bond, Zephyr could feel her life force dimming like a candle in the wind. No. He gathered her into his arms, his own cursed wounds forgotten. Lirelei, stay with me, please. Her eyes fluttered open, brown and human and so very tired. The curse, she whispered. I can see it clearly now. It's not just on you, it's woven into your entire bloodline. That's why it couldn't be broken before. It feeds on Nightwhisper blood, growing, stronger with each generation. Save your strength, Zephyr begged. The codex, my mother's journal, hidden in the healer's cottage where I grew up, 3rd floorboard from the fireplace. She coughed, blood speckling her lips. But you don't need it anymore. The cure requires the willing sacrifice of Moonweaver power to cleanse Nightwhisper blood. I give it. Freely. No. Zephyr's voice broke. There has to be another way. Perhaps there is, Morwen interrupted, kneeling beside them. The soul merge ritual. It's been done only once before, 1,000 years ago. It would unite you completely, not just as mates, but as one being, sharing power, sharing life force. The curse couldn't survive it because you'd be neither fully Nightwhisper nor fully Moonweaver, but something entirely new. Do it, Zephyr said immediately. The choice must be mutual, Morwen warned. And Lirelei must be conscious too. But Lirelei had gone still in his arms. Her breathing stopped. Then, turn her first, Korvac said suddenly, having been freed when Timaris died. Everyone turned to stare at the Northern Alpha. My bite could make her strong enough to survive the ritual. Consider it. Payment for my foolishness in trusting the witches. Without hesitation, Zephyr nodded. This was no time for pride. Korvac knelt beside them and bit Lirelei's neck with surprising gentleness, infusing her with alpha wolf essence. Her back arched as the change began, violent and immediate. Now, Morwen shouted, while both magics are active. She began chanting in the tongue that predated all languages. A circle of pure moonlight formed around Zephyr and Lirelei. Do you accept the merge? Morwen asked formally. Yes, they said in unison, Zephyr aloud, and Lirelei threw a gasp as her eyes snapped open. 1 silver, 1 gold. The moonlight erupted into a pillar of pure energy. They rose into the air, their bodies beginning to glow as the ritual took hold. Through the blinding light, 2 forms could be seen no longer separate but intertwining, their very essences merging into one. When the light finally faded, they collapsed together, unconscious but breathing. The curse marks were completely gone from Zephyr's skin, and Lirelei's form had stabilized neither fully human nor fully wolf, but something beautifully unique. It's done, Morwen said exhaustedly. They are one now. The curse is broken, and a new age begins. 1 year later, the grand amphitheater overflowed with guests from all races, wolves, humans, witches who'd renounced the shadow path, all united in celebration. Lirelei stood before them, her hand in Zephyr's, wearing a gown that shimmered with moonlight. Her belly was gently rounded with their first child, a baby the seers proclaimed would be the first of a new generation, bridging all worlds. Through their merged souls, she felt Zephyr's joy, his pride, his endless love. They were never alone now, always feeling each other's presence like a warm embrace. "No regrets?" Zephyr whispered as he placed the official mate mark, gentle this time. "None," she replied, then laughed as their baby kicked already strong, already magical. "Though I do miss the simple days of just being a healer." "You still are a healer," he reminded her. "You healed centuries of division, broke an ancient curse, and united the packs." "We did," she corrected, pulling him down for a kiss as their united peoples cheered. As the celebration continued around them, Lirelei reflected on the journey that had brought them here. From a servant who shouldn't have been at a mating ceremony to the queen of all 7 territories, mated to the Alpha King through a bond that transcended normal understanding. The age of separation was over. The age of unity had begun. And somewhere in the crowd, Elder Morwen, the last lunar sage, smiled and faded into moonlight, her purpose finally fulfilled.